There is one room left, sir, and one bed in it, and the bridge at Nately is 4 feet under. You may have the room and the lady may sleep in the tap room with the carriers, or you may settle it between you, but I'll not stand in this doorway another minute with the rain coming in." The landlady of the Ram at Highfield folded her arms. Adrian Fell, 5th Duke of Orwell, wet to the shoulders and holding a broken whip, looked down at the young woman beside him, who had walked the last mile and a half of that road in thin shoes and had not once complained. "Madam," he said to the landlady, "we will take the room, and you will bring up a truckle bed, or failing that a quantity of blankets, and a screen if there is such a thing in this county, and you will do it before you do anything else." "There's no truckle." "Then blankets." "And no screen." "Then," said Adrian, "blankets, and a great deal of hot water, and your best supper. And I shall pay you a guinea for the room and a guinea for the trouble of it. And if there is any further difficulty, I shall buy the inn." The landlady looked at him a moment longer, took in the coat and the voice, and the settled expression of a man to whom nobody had said no in some considerable time, and went. Which left him in a low-paneled bedchamber under the eaves with one bed, one chair, one small fire, and Miss Hester Ravel. She had put her bandbox down on the chair. She was standing in the middle of the floor in a soaked gray pelisse, hatless, her hair coming down in wet ropes on one side, and she was, Adrian observed with something close to admiration, thinking very fast and very clearly. "Sir," she said, "before either of us says anything gallant, I should like to lay out the position, because I am the one who will bear it." "Please." "If it is known that I passed a night in a locked room at a coaching inn with a gentleman, I do not get the post at Marlingford." She said it flatly, as a matter of fact. "I am to be music mistress at a young ladies' academy at £40 a year, and I have 3 sisters and a mother in a cottage at Nately, which, as you have heard, is presently under water. The lady who keeps that academy will not inquire into circumstances. Nobody ever does. And I have precisely one thing to bring to Marlingford besides my hands, and it is my character." "I understand." "With respect, I doubt it. You are a gentleman on a bad road. By Friday this is a story you tell at your club." Her chin came up. "So I shall go down and sit in the tap-room, and I shall be perfectly safe among the carriers, because I shall sit by the fire and darn, and in the morning nobody will have anything to say about either of us." "You will not," said Adrian. "You cannot forbid me. You are not my employer." "No, I am a man who has spent the last 2 hours watching you walk through a flood in shoes made of paper, and I decline to add to your evening the pleasure of sitting up all night in wet clothes among 11 strangers." He put the broken whip down on the mantel. "Miss Ravel, I am going to say something now, and then I am going to stop talking about it, because I think you have been managed at quite enough today. You will have the bed and the fire and the door. I shall have the floor on this side of the room with my back to the wall and my coat over me, and I shall not cross that beam in the boards." He pointed to it, between now and daylight. "You have my word. I am aware that a man's word is worth nothing at all to a woman who has to sleep in the same room as it, so I shall add a thing that is worth rather more. The door has a bolt, and you will bolt it, and I shall be on the wrong side of it if you prefer. In the passage, I have slept in worse places and lately." Hester Ravel stared at him. "You cannot sleep in a passage." "I assure you I can. I have slept in a ditch in Galicia with a mule." "You are—" She stopped. She looked at his coat, and then at the whip on the mantel, and Adrian saw her arrive at approximately the right conclusion and decide, visibly, to leave it where it lay. "You are being extremely inconvenient. I had my whole speech prepared." "You may deliver it. I shall be attentive." There is no point delivering a speech to a man who has already given you the bed and offered to sleep in a corridor, said Hester crossly. It quite spoils the argument. And Adrian Fell, who had not laughed since March, laughed. They did not sleep for a long time. The rain came at the window in handfuls. The fire ticked. Adrian sat on the floor on his side of the beam with his back to the wall and his coat over his knees, and Hester sat up in the bed with the blankets to her chin and her wet hair spread over the pillow to dry, and they talked across the dark like two people on opposite banks of a river. She told him about the cottage at Nately and the three sisters, and the piano in it, an ancient square thing with two dead notes, and how she had taught herself on it out of her father's tutor books after he died, and had taught all three sisters, and the blacksmith's daughter, and a boy who mended clocks. Two dead notes, Adrian said. Which? The F above middle C, and the G below it. How do you play anything at all? You arrange around them, said Hester. You would be astonished what can be got round if you decide at the outset that the whole is permanent and stop grieving over it. Adrian sat in the dark and thought about that for rather longer than the remark required. He told her because it was 2 in the morning and the rain was very loud, and she had asked plainly what had put that expression on his face when the landlady mentioned Nately about his brother. 12 years younger, my father's second family. He was to have had the living at Nately. He was ordained at Michaelmas, and he was so pleased with himself that he wore the coat to breakfast. Adrian heard his own voice go flat and let it. He took a fever in March and died in 9 days. I was in London. I came down for the funeral, and I have not been able to sit in that house since. So I have spent 4 months driving about the north of England looking at property. I have no intention of buying. And this evening my horse put his foot in a hole in the dark, and I broke a whip and a wheel and lost my temper with a landlady. That is the whole of me, Miss Ravel. You may have it for nothing. The rain went on. F above middle C, said Hester Ravel quietly from the dark. I beg your pardon. That is what it is. A dead note in the middle of everything, where the tune wants to go. A pause. I shall not tell you it gets better, because that is what people say and it is not the point. It stays dead. But you do learn to arrange around it, and one day you notice you have played a whole piece and not once reached for it. And that is not disloyalty, sir, whatever you have been telling yourself at 2 in the morning in a hired room. Adrian Fell put his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, and did not trust himself to answer. Some while later, when the fire had gone to embers, he heard her say, sleepily and with unmistakable severity, You have not crossed the beam. No. Good. Bolt the door, Miss Ravel. I bolted it 2 hours ago, said Hester. I am poor, not stupid. Good night. The catastrophe arrived at 8 the next morning in the shape of Lady Marchant of Highfield Park, her daughter, and her daughter's companion, who had been driven from the road by the same flood, and who came into the Ram's parlor at precisely the moment Adrian Fell came down the stairs behind Miss Hester Ravel, both of them creased, both of them unmistakably having descended from the same door. Your Grace, said Lady Marchant. Adrian watched the word land. He watched Hester's shoulders go rigid, watched her, in the space of a breath, understand who he was, and what that made the story, and exactly how much worse it now was than the one she had been dreading. Lady Marchant, he said, good morning. Allow me to present Miss Ravel. Miss Ravel? He did not hurry. She is to be music mistress at Mrs. Gorse's academy at Marlingford. The Nately Bridge is under water. She walked 1.5 miles of that road last night, and this house had 1 room, and I gave her the bed and the bolt, and slept on the floorboards with my coat over me. And I mention it because you are about to spend a great deal of ingenuity arriving at some other arrangement, and I should like to save you the labor." There was a silence of the kind he had heard before in his life, and had generally enjoyed. "How very singular," said Lady Marchant. "It was extremely uncomfortable," said Adrian. Hester Ravel got out of that parlor, out of that inn, and onto the 11 o'clock mail with her bandbox, and she did it in about 9 minutes, and Adrian let her, because she had said very quietly at the foot of the stairs, "Do not follow me out. Whatever you mean to do not do it where that woman can watch," and she had been right. He gave it 4 days. He spent them, first, discovering what he had suspected before the mail was out of the yard, that Lady Marchant had written to Mrs. Gorse of Marlingford by the same post. He learned this from Mrs. Gorse's reply, which he intercepted by the simple expedient of arriving at the academy at 9 in the morning on the 4th day, and asking to see the principal. "Your Grace," said Mrs. Gorse, who was a hard, frightened, not unkind woman of 50, "I have had to let her go. You must see that I have 22 young ladies and their mothers to answer to. I did not enjoy doing it." "Where is she?" "She left an hour ago. She would take no character from me. She said she would not have a paper that had a lie in it either way." Mrs. Gorse's mouth twisted. "She said, and I shall not forget it, that she had been given a bed and a bolted door by an honest man, and that she would rather be turned off for the truth than kept on for a fiction." Adrian found her at the crossroads beyond the town, sitting on a milestone with the bandbox at her feet, in the thin shoes, in the sun. She looked up. She was not crying. Her face had the particular stillness of somebody who has already done all the calculating there is to do. "You should not be here," said Hester. "I know. Would you get into the carriage?" "No." "May I sit on the milestone?" "There is not room, and you would look ridiculous." "Then I shall stand." Adrian took off his hat, because his hands wanted something to do. "Miss Ravel, I have come to make you an offer, and I am going to make a poor job of it, so I shall tell you first what it is not, because I have had 4 days in a carriage to think about the ways in which you would refuse me, and I have tried to close them off one at a time. It is not restitution. I have already dealt with Mrs. Gorse, not by threatening her, by endowing 2 scholarships at that academy on the condition that its music mistress be appointed by examination, and not by rumor, which will do more good after we are both dead than shouting at a frightened woman would do this morning. And there is a house at Nately above the flood line, with a roof and 6 rooms, and it is your mother's from Lady Day, whatever you say to me in the next 5 minutes. That is not part of the offer. That is me settling a debt I incurred by driving my horse into a hole. It is not duty. Everybody in 3 counties is at this moment explaining to somebody else that the Duke of Orwell has been trapped, and I find I cannot express how little I care what those people believe. If duty were the whole of it, I should have written you a letter with a settlement in it and gone abroad, and been thought very handsome about the business." "Then what is it?" said Hester. Adrian looked at her, at the bandbox, the milestone, the mended cuff, the entirely unfrightened eyes, and abandoned 4 days of preparation. "It is the F above middle C," he said. Hester Ravel's breath went out of her. "I have been reaching for that note since March," Adrian said, "and every time my hand goes down on nothing, and I stop playing altogether. 4 months of driving round the north of England, Miss Ravel, looking at houses. And a woman I had known for 9 hours sat up in the dark with the blankets to her chin, and told me the hole is permanent, and you arrange around it. And I have not had a single hour since, in which I was not either thinking about that or wishing I could ask you something else." He turned his hat over. "I do not want to marry you because I compromised you. I want to marry you because I slept on a floor in a wet coat, and it was the best night I have had in a year, and because you bolted the door 2 hours before I told you to, and because when Lady Marchant said your grace, I watched you understand the whole of your ruin in 1 second and stand up straighter, and I thought, there, that, I should like to be near that for the rest of my life. The wind moved in the hedge. A cart went by and the carter stared, and neither of them noticed. You have a great many houses, said Hester unsteadily. 11, all of them full of things nobody is permitted to move. And I have 2 dead notes and 3 sisters and no character. You have a character, said Adrian. Mrs. Gorse told me what you said to her about the paper. It cost you £40 a year and you said it anyway. I have met bishops with less. Hester Ravel stood up off the milestone. She was a good deal smaller than he was, and she looked up at him with her chin lifted in the way that he had already, in some private and unreasonable way, begun to think of as belonging to him. Say it plainly, then, she said. I have been managed a great deal this week. Marry me, said the 5th Duke of Orwell. Bring the sisters. Bring the square piano with the dead notes. I shall have it put in the long gallery at Orwell, and I shall not have it mended, and when people ask why, you may tell them. And be so good as to be in the room when I cannot play, which will be a great many evenings for a great many years, and tell me to arrange around it. Hester put out her hand. He took it. And then, because they were at a crossroads in full daylight with a carter going by, and there was nothing left in either of them to be careful with, she went up on her toes and he bent his head, and Adrian fell stopped at last, 4 months of driving about the north of England looking for something he could not name. They were married at Nately in June, in his brother's church, by his brother's successor, with the flood gone down and the watermark still visible on the churchyard wall. The story of the inn at Highfield was told at a great many tables that season, and told badly, and Adrian never once corrected it, on the grounds, as he explained to his wife, that any version in which he came off well would be less use to her than the plain fact of a duchess who did not care. Lady Marchant called at Orwell in September and was received with faultless courtesy and never asked twice. The square piano stood in the long gallery at Orwell for 40 years with its 2 dead notes, and every visitor asked, and every visitor was told, and the Duchess of Orwell taught 3 sisters, a blacksmith's daughter, a boy who mended clocks, and in the end 211 girls from an academy at Marlingford, where the music mistress was appointed by examination. And on winter evenings, when the wind got up and the rain came at the windows in handfuls, Adrian Fell would put down his book and listen to his wife playing round a hole in the middle of the keyboard, and think that there had never in the history of England been a man so fortunate in a broken whip.